few things are as important to child development as play is. Through play, your child is going to be practicing all those little skills that they're eventually going to need in their everyday lives as adults. Now, to understand why play is so important, I think it's very important that we first just take a step aside and have a look at how children experience the world and how they learn in order to understand how to approach play at certain ages. Now, we know that there are essentially 3 different levels of thinking for children. The first is a concrete level. And at the concrete level, your child needs to physically experience an object, to feel it, to taste it, to smell it, in order to understand what that object is and how it works. Only once they actually understand this concept can they use that to build new knowledge on top. So when we have a concrete understanding of the world, we can then move on to the second level, which is the more abstract representational level. So on this level, your child will now be able to understand that a picture of an orange or an object, for instance, will represent that object. And thirdly, we get to the level where your child can actually deal with the idea of an object. So if your child is reading a story, for instance, with the word orange in it, he'll be able to understand what that means because he understands what it looks like and he understands what it tastes, feels, smells like. So remember that new knowledge is always anchored to existing knowledge. And it's through play that your children experience the world and at the same time build on their knowledge. So in order for us to look at a child's cognitive development and to enhance that cognitive development, we need to let them explore. When your child is dropping an object, throwing it up, catching it, what's actually happening in the brain is that they're forming those neurological connections so that later on they can understand concepts like size, like shape, gravity, weight, measurement. We also know that fairy tales and songs that are so much fun are actually stimulating your child's imagination. They're building those language skills that are later going to contribute to reading and being able to build new knowledge. Play is also a perfect opportunity for you to bond with your child. We know that through play and interaction, your baby is learning and accumulating new things. Play supports physical development. So when your child is playing, they're using all the big muscles in the body, what we call the gross motor skills. And we know that the finer motor muscles, so all the little muscles in the fingers, in the hands, in the wrists, those only start developing once the big gross motor muscles have developed. So having your child climb on a jungle gym, run around, catch a ball is eventually going to help him to be able to control a pencil and to write neatly. It's also very important for social interaction. Think about all the things you learn while you're playing with your friends. You learn to take turns, you learn to wait, you learn that sometimes you need to interact and other times you need to sit back and wait for your friend to do the interaction. A simple game, I always think about marbles. I watch children playing marbles and I think, it's such an awesome game, but what they're doing there is so incredibly important. So they're negotiating, they are learning to judge other people's character, they're starting to learn who they can trust and who they can't trust. What are the rules and which rules do we stick to and which rules can we bend? So absolutely invaluable business skills that your children are learning there. And also keep in mind that play is a very important part in forming the emotional life of a child. So children will represent almost everything that they are feeling within their play. And I've seen so often in my play therapy sessions that when a child has experienced a trauma or something very intense has happened to them, they will play that situation out over and over and over until they get to a stage where they themselves have processed it and they're able to move on. Also remember that there are different types of play. So there is structured play in which the adult, or usually someone who looks after the child, will decide what is going to be played, how they will play it. But then there's also unstructured play, and it's this unstructured play often that is so important in developing all those skills, especially the social skills. Some of the things that I think is very important to keep in mind when we talk about play with your child is that playtime does not mean toy time. The two are very different. So playing means any pleasurable activity that you're enjoying, and that could be playing with objects, playing with other people, playing with yourself. Sometimes that play just means movement, just moving around and doing things. And quite often, the fewer toys your child has, the more openly they will explore their environment. They'll go and have a look at what's around and what's interesting. They'll become more creative, more resourceful at finding things to play with. And some psychologists have actually gotten to a stage where they've recommended that children have very few toys, because we find that having only a few toys is very good for building concentration. You've only got one or two things to concentrate on, whereas when you have too many toys around you, especially little children, there's too much to distract you, and they often can't build those concentration skills of just focusing on one thing at a time. Remember also that interaction, we've said this a lot, but it's the golden rule. Interaction is absolutely vital for play. So when you see that your child is wanting to interact with somebody, get down on the floor with them, play with them. If it's a silly game, it doesn't matter. Even the silliest of games can help to build cognitive development. It's also very important to find a balance between choosing an activity for your child and letting your child choose an activity by their own. So letting them just do what comes naturally and what feels good. It's absolutely okay for children and toddlers to be totally bored. It's one of the things we try and prevent, because we're told cognitive development, we have to build that brain. But when your child is a little bit bored, they are going to explore, they're going to start exploring, they are going to really find things that inspire them. And being bored and not knowing what to do with yourself is very important for introspection, because you start thinking, okay, what about me now? What do I want to do? What is interesting? So that also builds those internal skills that are so important. Screens are a two-dimensional representation of the world. It's not a three-dimensional interactive representation of what the world is. It's very important that we add that playtime is definitely not the same as screen time, especially at this age. Young children learn very little from sitting in front of a screen. Remember, we've just spoken about how important that concrete experience of the world is, exploring things physically. So when your child is looking at a screen, especially at this age, they're unfortunately not learning much or interacting much with the world around them.